A cold, steely anger permeated Odin's voice as he asked a single, quiet question. Why are there children in Valhalla? Odin surveyed the day's dead and scowled. Not at the eclectic variety of men and women before him, he knew, better than most, that a warrior might be found in any kind of body or attitude. But huddled at the back of the waiting souls were some 200 who emphatically could not, belong in Valhalla. Why have you brought these to me? He demanded of the chief of the Valkyries, as her sisters deposited the last souls at his gate. Our duty is to ferry the spirits of the slain, Lord Odin. We do as we are bound. I am only to receive half of each day's take, and that is what we have brought you. Odin ground his teeth. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. But he too had his duties, so he tended first to the souls who belonged. He greeted them gravely, explained their place in the halls of the gods, preparing for the day of Ragnarok and the final battle, and turned them over to his quartermasters for arming and training. Only then did he turn to the group whose presence so vexed him. Children. He felt fury boil up inside him at the sight and made an effort to hide it. It would do no good to rage at them. They were not at fault for the situation, and most of them were already weeping simply from what they'd heard him tell the adult souls. So he masked the fire in his eyes and the thunder in his voice and brought the children to the servers who supplied food and drink for the fighters. These here were clearly brought to us by some mistake, he told them. Give them food and some place to sleep, away from the fighting. I pledge to you, young ones, you will not be made to fight. I go now to find the one responsible for... He turned and strode away before his temper could overcome him. Loki, the name came unbidden to his mind. It had to be Loki, surely. Who else but the trickster god could cause such a perversion of the old order? Who else would? But, as his long strides carried him out of the gates of his halls, he found himself doubtful. He had visited Loki's prison not a month prior. He had made a habit of doing so every few years, to reassure himself that his erstwhile blood brother was still contained. The insults and epithets Loki had hurled at him during that visit had held none of the sly smugness they did when he had some plot on the boil, only anger and grief. But if not him, then I am only to receive half of each day's take, and that is what we have brought you. Freya, recipient of the other half of those slain in battle. Could she really have been so lax in her own duty that she would allow children to be sent to the fields of eternal slaughter? Their arrangement had stood for years beyond count. It was unthinkable that she would allow such a thing to happen. As unthinkable as children being sent to Valhalla, and that had now come to pass. The thought brought the anger back immediately. It was not that Odin disliked children, far from it. He delighted in their curiosity, their joy, and wonder. But they were woefully ill-suited to the vicious, hand-to-hand combat that was the entire point of Valhalla. Even with weapons, they could not defend themselves against hardened adult warriors. They died over and over again, and the terror of it never left them. That was precisely why he and Freya had their ancient arrangement. How could she shirk her responsibilities now? The thoughts chased themselves around his head, so that when he finally reached the entrance to Freya's domain, he was in as foul a temper as he ever had been. Freya, Odin thundered, pounding his fist on one of the towering oaks that framed the gate into Folkvanger. Come forth, Freya, I would have words with you. Allfather, the goddess seemed to solidify out of the rich golden light that flowed through the gate. What troubles bring you to my doorstep? The calmness of her greeting served only to make Odin's fury boil over. You know damned well what brings me here. You have ignored your duty, and innocent mortal souls have paid the price for it. Anger to match Odin's flashed in Freya's eyes. You have the audacity to question my sense of duty? Explain yourself, Odin, and do so quickly before I remind you that war is also one of my domains. The arrangement has stood for eons. Half of those slain in battle go to you, and half to me. I took my half, Odin. Clearly you did not. There are children in Valhalla today. Freya, why are there children in Valhalla? A pain as old as the world etched itself across Freya's features. You know as well as I do that one needs not be a warrior to be slain in battle. Which is why you and I serve as we do. My realm is for those who can and will fight, to train them for the last day when the Gjallarhorn sounds. You are supposed to take those who cannot or would not do well on the battlefield and grant them respite. Freya crossed her arms and stared at Odin coldly. You need not explain the purpose of my own fields to me, Allfather. Odin matched her stare for stare. Oh, mustn't I? That's why you always choose first, Freya, to spare from my bloody halls those who are not suited for them. As I always have and always will. Not today, it would seem. You chose haphazardly and sent those who deserved peace to the slaughter instead. The goddess remained as still and cold as a statue. I took my half, Odin. Then I ask you again, why are there children in Valhalla? The realization hit Odin like an arrow to the chest, cutting off even his mighty rage. He stared at Freya in horrified comprehension. More than half of those slain today were children. The goddess of love and war nodded, unshed tears brightening her eyes. Did you really think I would have allowed a single one to go to your charnel house otherwise? I am sorry, Freya. Odin felt the strong need to sit down and lowered himself down the trunk of the ageless oak to the ground. In all the countless years, such a thing has never happened. With all my wisdom, I couldn't imagine it happening. I've never shirked my duties in all the countless years either, Freya retorted, still stung. Yet you imagine that just fine. Odin winced. I did you a grave disservice, O Lady of the Veneer, and I apologize. But if you are still willing to advise me after I insulted you, what am I to do with these children? Freya stared at him for several more long moments as the ice of her own anger slowly thawed. Eventually she sighed and sat down beside Odin. Well, Allfather, have you ever really thought about our charge? We swore to each take half of the slain, yes. But at what point did we pledge to keep all those we claim? What? We swore an oath to take half of the slain. We never swore that we would keep them all until the last day. I have sent souls to other gods before if they found Folkvanger a poor fit. Odin was clearly bewildered. Never considered that. Freya laughed. Shall I summon the Valkyries, Allfather? They can bring the children here if you give the word. Yes, thank you. Odin stood and offered his hand to Freya, helping her back to her feet. The goddess brushed herself off and then lifted a small horn from her belt, sounding a single clear, musical note. It echoed over the plains of Asgard and was answered by the sound of great wings as the Valkyries responded to the call. Brynhildr, Odin greeted the chief of them as she landed. I have a task for your sisters. Have them gather the children they delivered today to Valhalla and bring them here. It shall be done, Lord Odin. She raised her hand, and the gathered Valkyries took wing for Valhalla. I would ask something of you as well, Odin continued. Do you know how this travesty came to pass? Brynhildr frowned. There are some leaders of mortals who desire only bloodshed, Allfather. They make war without ceasing, and do not care who dies so long as there is death. They offer passage for the women and children to places promised to be safe, and then send their warriors to raze those places to the ground. Odin felt his gut churn. They lured the defenseless away from the fighting just to kill them anyway? So it would seem, Lord Odin. By Buri's frosty balls, Odin raised a hand to his face, rubbing absently at his missing eye. Traded away for wisdom in ages past, it still ached sometimes when knowledge came hard. Do you know then men who gave the order? I do, Lord Odin. Then Brynhildr, I have one last task for you. Track these men as they live out their lives. And when they die, no matter by what means, his voice was as cold and as hard as steel, bring them to me. I would have words with them. Original prompt.